Across the Mediterranean from Rome, one of the most famous female rulers came to power, Cleopatra. Cleopatra was not Roman. She was the last leader of Egypt, but her reign had a huge influence on Rome and is seen as a crucial part of the transition of Rome into the Roman Empire. Cleopatra was trying to keep Egypt in play as a major world power in the wake of the crushing Roman Republic, and both internal and external threats. In 51 BCE, the Egyptian throne passed to 18-year-old Cleopatra and her 10-year-old brother, Ptolemy VIII. As all too common in politics, her brother's advisors soon painted her as a political threat, and she was forced to flee to Syria. Refusing to see her power stripped away, she raised an army of mercenaries and returned the following year to face her brother's forces in a civil war. She was not only financing the war, but she also made sure to have a presence on the battlefield. She used all the weapons at her disposal, including her political guile. When Julius Caesar came to Alexandria, Cleopatra had herself smuggled into his headquarters to ask for his support in the war against her brother. Finding mutually beneficial ground, power for her, money for him, they eventually united against her brother and successfully overthrew him. She also gave birth to Caesar's son. Cleopatra would maintain a long, strained relationship with Caesar in Rome. But after Caesar's assassination, she saw herself potentially in the crosshairs of the new Roman Empire. In her time as pharaoh, she worked to gain the respect of the people for herself and her son, even identifying herself as a vessel of the goddess Isis, which was typical of Egyptian royalty trying to secure their power. However, internal strife always followed Cleopatra. Her younger sister, Arsinoe, who had been exiled, was looking to dethrone Cleopatra. And, seeking additional security, Cleopatra found herself in a political and romantic alliance with Mark Antony, her ultimate undoing. In her first formal meeting with the general, Plutarch wrote, "She brought with her her surest hopes in her own magic arts and charms." Antony was in his own power struggle with Julius Caesar's designated successor, his nephew, Octavian, the eventual Augustus. The struggle was over the control of the Roman Empire, which had been divided into 3 sections. In an attempt to secure peace, Octavian's younger sister, Octavia, had been married to Antony. The marriage was initially successful, but tensions mounted, and Antony and Octavian were soon at war. In 36 BCE, Antony left home to command troops in Parthia, resuming his alliance and romantic liaison with Cleopatra. Octavia was a good and decent wife who, despite his complete betrayal and infidelity, brought him troops and money. When she arrived, he refused her, and 3 years later, she obtained a divorce. Cleopatra brought her ships and soldiers to aid Antony in the Battle of Antium in 31 BCE. But they lost, and she and Antony fled back to Alexandria, only to be cornered. Both famously committed suicide, and their bodies were paraded through Rome. Despite being mother to Julius Caesar's son, Cleopatra was labeled as a seductress by Roman historians due to her relationships, and while these relationships were undoubtedly romantic in nature, she used the opportunity to protect her power. Cleopatra stood toe-to-toe with some of the most famous figures in the classical world. Further south, another female African monarch prepared to face Rome and cease their expansion southward. And, unlike Cleopatra, she would succeed. Sort of. Romans began incursions south toward the empire of Kush. So the Kushites planned preemptive attacks on Roman-held cities in southern Egypt and were initially successful, but their king died in battle. Back home, the queen Kandake, meaning great woman, Amenorreus, and her son again led the Kushites north to engage the Romans. Romans responded by leading 10,000 soldiers southward. The result was basically a stalemate. By succeeding in the negotiations, Kandake Amenorreus spared her people domination, like a badass boss woman of the ancient world.